7.
Well, we are listening right now to some great music, and it's been a great broadcast this morning that we've been listening to with Minister or Marcia Brown, Sister Marcia Brown, and we also were listening to Anita Hamilton right here. Our Minister Priscilla Flint will be coming into the studio and she will be presenting. I believe she has a guest that will be a part of her broadcast. So I want you all to stay with us as we gear up for another broadcast here on the Boston Praise Radio and TV network. I said to my wife yesterday as I was leaving the house to come to the studio, I was looking at MSNBC, and I said to her, Kay, look at the commitment of these broadcasters. They're actually at their station 5 days a week, early in the morning, 5 days a week. How do they keep that stamina up? How do they keep that going? How do they do that? And she said what I already knew. They're able to do that because they have a staff of producers and writers and people who help prepare them in the morning. They have a lot of what we do not have, and it is a drain for Ron Bell, myself, Minister Priscilla, the Mamleo group to get up in the morning, drive into the studio, sit down behind the microphone and the cameras, and do it all yourself, trying to find the right stories. It's a lot of pressure. And I'm hoping that as we continue our broadcast ministry here on Boston Praise Radio, Boston Black News, WBPG-LP 102.9 FM radio, that we will be able to find and solidify, bring into the studio the helpers that we need in order for us to be a first-class radio station with reporters and broadcasters who are going to bring you the news here on Boston Praise Radio and TV, Boston Black News, and 102.9. There are a couple of news stories that have caught my attention. One is the story about Mayor Wu, what happened on yesterday. I heard about it before I read about it, and it's the story of Mayor Wu actually being driven, as she should be, on yesterday, and in her SUV, the mayor's SUV, there was a crash in Roslindale, and Mayor Wu talked about what happened. It said, and I'm going to go ahead and read this. It said, 3 people were taken to the hospital from a crash, but the mayor's office and no one was seriously hurt. So the mayor was sitting in the front row on the passenger side, and her driver was driving with the lights on. And it remained unclear where Wu was going or why the vehicle's emergency lights were on. And that's what she was being asked to discuss. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu has briefly addressed the crash of her city's vehicle that it was involved in on Tuesday in Roslindale, and a newly released police report showed that 3 people were taken to the hospital after the crash, including a child and the officer who was driving Wu. The mayor's black electric Mustang SUV had its police lights on during the crash, but It's not yet clear why. Wu didn't say when asked by reporters at an event Wednesday, and the police report didn't offer an explanation. No one was seriously hurt in the crash, according to the mayor's office. Surveillance video shows the moment the SUV, and I actually saw this on TV on yesterday, and I also saw it on the video news feed of how the mayor's vehicle was coming. It looked like it was coming down the street, and another vehicle crashed. It looked like they crashed into each other. I can't say who was at fault. I won't even speculate. But it says that surveillance video shows the moment the SUV, which appears to be making a left at the intersection of Hyde Park Avenue and Blakemore Street, get hit by another SUV. The mayor's vehicle did not have the green light based on the vehicle. So, because the mayor's vehicle had the flashing lights on, as though they were going to an emergency, they kept going because they made the assumption that when people saw the police lights on the vehicle, that they would move out of the way and the mayor's vehicle can keep going, but that was not the place. The driver of the other vehicle, Yos Mary Pina, told NBC News 10 Boston and Telemundo Nueva she didn't have the time to hit the brakes. When she saw the cruiser and that the crash was traumatizing. So they both came to the intersection at the same time, and bang, they collided. 3 people were hospitalized in the crash, according to the Boston police report. A woman and a young child who were in the SUV that hit the mayor's vehicle, and the police officer who was driving Wu. Wu, named in the report only as a person known to the Commonwealth, said she had minor pain on her right side but declined medical attention. I think she should have had herself checked out, because when you look at the crash on Hyde Park Avenue, it looked like they really hit each other with a severity. The report noted that the mayor's unmarked electric Mustang had its lights and sirens activated ahead of the crash. So it wasn't just the lights, but the siren was also wailing as they were driving down the street. But the mayor didn't say why. So everyone's asking the question, if the police lights were on in her vehicle and if the siren was wailing, where were you going? You know, what was your destination? That's the question. The SUV stopped at the red light and then slowly approached the intersection to ensure that an oncoming traffic traveling outbound on Hyde Park Ave were able to see and hear the cruiser entering the intersection, end of quote. The driver wrote in the police report the Mustang was in the second of 2 lanes when it was hit, and the officer noted that the other vehicle, quote, did not stop or slow down for the cruiser's lights and siren, end of quote. The crash took place outside the headquarters of the Boston Police Detectives Union, and 3 police sergeants were at the scene. The woman and the child in the SUV that hit the mayor's vehicle initially declined medical attention, but an ambulance was still called to the scene to evaluate the 2 of them and ended up taking them to the hospital for further evaluation. So the mayor declined to be taken to the hospital. The woman declined to go along with the child, but eventually they went. The police officer was hospitalized and discharged the same day. We asked about the incident at an event on Wednesday, her first in public since the crash. She said she was okay and didn't initially answer the question about why the lights were on. After the event, she told reporters she was not headed to an emergency and only said there was an internal review into the crash underway at this time. And I see a photo on Twitter of the mayor as she's arriving to an event, and the reporters are swarming around her, wanting to ask her a question. Were you on your way to an emergency? Why did you have the police lights on? Why did you have the siren on? And it said on her way out of an event, Mayor Wu tells us she was not heading to an emergency at the time. As to why the emergency lights were on, she says there will be an internal review. So the question is, can the mayor's vehicle have the lights and siren on even if she's not on her way to an emergency? I don't have the answer to that. We'll know sooner or later. The store clerk who saw the aftermath of the crash took a photo showing the mayor standing with a group of people. Pina, she was returning home with her 1-year-old baby after dropping off her other 2 children at school when the accident happened. So the child in the vehicle with Miss Pina was 1 year old. I would not have declined going to the hospital. I would have gone, if not to make sure I was okay, but to make sure that my baby was okay. If I was Sister Pina. Quote, I didn't really see them, she said. I was driving, and since the traffic light was green when I was crossing, that's where we collided, she said in Spanish. Pina still remembers the panic she felt after the collision, calling it very traumatizing. So I'm glad she went to the hospital, because you would have to conclude that because of the intensity of the crash, because both vehicles collided into each other, I don't know how fast they were going, you have to conclude that Miss Pina was traumatized and that she didn't know whether or not she should have gone to the hospital. We all know that after a crash, after a collision like that, that your body begins to feel the pain either days afterwards or hours afterwards. So you should always go to the hospital and be checked out. And I feel the same for the mayor. If her driver went to the hospital, she should have also gone to the hospital just to get herself checked out. She said that the police vehicle should use caution as it crosses the traffic. Quote, this is what Miss Pina said. She didn't stop and didn't have time to hit the brakes, Pina said, adding that she was nevertheless grateful to Wu for how she reacted after the crash. So Mayor Wu, word sounds off.
So you talking is not in sync.
Yeah. Mayor Wu was kind and considerate as she was talking to the young lady and trying to present herself in a very calm manner when she was talking to this mother. Miss Pina said she didn't stop, and I didn't have time to hit the brakes, Pina said, adding that she was nevertheless grateful to Wu for how she reacted after the crash. A representative for the mayor's office issued a statement about the crash Tuesday night. Thankfully, no one sustained any major injuries. The Boston Police Department will conduct an investigation of the incident as they do with all crashes involving a department motor vehicle. So we're thankful that Mayor Wu is doing well, and we're thankful that Ms. Pena is doing well, and we're hoping that this incident will be sorted out and that there will be a finding made and that Ms. Pena and the mayor could go on about their business and responsibilities without any further discussion about what happened. Ms. Pena had said in another story that I read that she was concerned about her insurance, and if she was found at fault, she was concerned about the impact on her insurance. I hope they're both doing very well. There's another story that I'd like to look at before Minister Priscilla comes into the studio for her broadcast, and that is the story of the Florida woman who shot a Florida white woman who shot a black woman. Let's see if I can bring up the audio regarding what happened in Florida with regards to the right that residents have who have weapons to shoot their guns and actually kill others if they feel that their life is in danger. Let me bring up the sound and see if we can play this right now, because this is a story that we should be covering and a story that we should learn from and study and watch, because I'm concerned about what happened in Florida. The stand your ground rule is one that this woman, white woman who shot the black woman, let's go and listen.
Neighborhood feud that turned deadly in Florida. A woman is claiming self-defense after killing her neighbor by shooting the mother of four through the front door. CBS's Mark Strassman reports some are upset that it took 4 days for police to make an arrest.
Susan Lawrence, witnesses say, was that neighbor. Beyond unpleasant, she tormented her community, shouted racist insults at little kids. But ugly turned to deadly last Friday. Police say Lawrence killed A.J. Owens, a mother of four, by shooting once through her locked front door.
When does a person get shot for knocking on a door with their 9-year-old son standing next to them?
At this apartment complex, 2 of Owens' young kids have been playing outside. Police say Lawrence yelled at them, threw a skate, swung an umbrella. Then police say Owens knocked on her door for an explanation. Gunshot.
She had a 12-year-old that is also blaming himself because when he responded, he couldn't save his mother.
Lawrence was charged with manslaughter. What eats at Owens' family, police took 4 days to make an arrest.
This will encourage people to shoot black people first and ask questions later. And we can't send that message.
Police say Lawrence has claimed self-defense under Florida's Stand Your Ground law. She could face a 30-year sentence on that manslaughter charge. Nora?
Mark Strassman in Florida.
Okay, so the story is a white woman who fatally shot a black neighbor through the front door, arrested on manslaughter and other charges. A white woman who fired through her front door and killed a black neighbor was arrested on Tuesday. Authorities said in a case that puts Florida's divisive stand your ground law back in the spotlight. The shooting sparked widespread anger and protest. The Marion County Sheriff's Office said Susan Lawrence, 58, was charged with manslaughter with a firearm and other offenses. Ajiki Owens, a 35-year-old mother of four, was killed Friday night in a shooting Sheriff Billy Woods said, was the combination of a 2.5-year-old feud between the neighbors. They lived in the rolling hills south of Ocala, a North Florida city that's the heart of the state's horse country. The video posted on Facebook late Tuesday night, the sheriff said, "This was not a stand your ground case, but simply a killing." Quote, "Now, many of you were struggling to understand why there was not an immediate arrest," end of quote, the sheriff said. Quote, "The laws here in the state of Florida are clear. Now, I may not like them, I may not agree with them, but however, those laws I will follow," the end of quote. The video shared by the sheriff's office shows 2 detectives and a deputy escorting this white woman who was wearing shorts, a black top, and a jacket down a hallway. The woman's hands were behind her back as she walked. According to the sheriff's office, evidence showed that over time, Lawrence had become angry over Owens's children playing in a field close to her apartment. On Friday night, the officer said that the white woman got into an argument with the children and was overheard yelling at them by a neighbor. During the argument, the officer continued that the woman threw a roller skate at Owen's 10-year-old son and hit him on his toe. The boy and his 12-year-old brother then went to speak to the woman. She opened her door and swung at them with an umbrella. They told her they went to their mother and said this is what happened. And the mother approached the woman and knocked on the door multiple times and demanded that the woman come outside. The woman then fired one shot through the door, striking Owens in her upper chest. Quote, "At the time she was shot, Owens' 10-year-old son was standing beside her," the sheriff's office noted. Deputies responded to the trespass call at the apartment Friday night, found Owens suffering from gunshot wounds. She later died at the hospital. This is tragic. When questioned by the sheriff's office, the woman claimed that she acted in self-defense and that Owens was trying to break down her door. She also claimed that Owens had come after her in the past and had previously attacked her. The officer continued, quote, "But the deputies were able to establish that the woman's actions were not justified under Florida law and that she was arrested," the officer said. "The manslaughter charge that she's facing is punishable by up to 30 years in prison." The office noted she also was charged with culpable negligence, battery, and 2 counts of assault. Billy Woods said in a statement that he wants to thank Ms. Owens' family for their patience as we conducted a diligent investigation that we were bound by law to conduct. The woman's fate is now in the hands of the judicial system, which I trust will deliver justice in due course. As I go to bed tonight, I will be saying a prayer for Miss Owens' family and the rest of the family. I'd ask all of you to do the same. In the last comments, Owens' family members called for the arrest at a news conference on Monday. In a visual Monday, Owens' mother, Pamela Diaz, said she was seeking justice for her daughter and her grandchildren. Quote, "My daughter, my grandchildren's mother, was shot and killed with her son standing next to her," Diaz said. Quote, "She had no weapon. She posed no imminent threat to anyone," end of quote. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump, who represented and is representing the Owens family, said the statement that the shooter had been yelling racial slurs at the children before the confrontation. He also represented Trayvon Martin's family in 2012 when a black teenager was killed in a case that drew worldwide attention to the state's Stand Your Ground law. The sheriff's office has confirmed there were slurs uttered, or they haven't confirmed that there were slurs uttered or said whether race was a factor in the shooting. After 36 mostly black protesters had gathered outside the Marion County Judicial Centers Tuesday to demand that the shooter be arrested in the county's latest flashpoint over race and gun violence, the chief prosecutor, the state attorney, William Gladson, met with the protesters and urged patience while the investigation continued. Woods said Monday detectives were working with the state's attorney's office and had to investigate possible self-defense claims before they could move forward with any possible criminal charges. The sheriffs pointed out that because of the Stand Your Ground law, he couldn't make an arrest unless he could prove that the shooter didn't act in self-defense. On Tuesday, a stuffed teddy bear and bouquet of flowers marked the area near where Owens was shot. Nearby, children were riding bikes and scooters and playing basketball. Protesters chanted "No justice, no peace," and AJ, 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 using Owens' nickname. They carried signs saying, quote, "Say her name, and it's about us." Outside, the Reverend Bernard Tuggerson said that the black community in Ocala has suffered injustices for years. Quote, "Marion County is suffering and the needs to be healed completely," end of quote, he said. Quote, "If we don't turn from our wicked ways of the world, it's going to be an ongoing problem. We want answers," end of quote. Lauren Smith, 40, lives across the street from where the shooting happened. She was on her porch that day and says one of Owens' young sons, pacing and yelling, quote, "They shot my mama, they shot my mama," end of quote. She ran toward the house and started chest compressions until a rescue crew arrived. She said there wasn't any altercation and Owens didn't have a weapon. Quote, "She was angry all the time that the children were playing out there," end of quote, Smith said. Quote, "She would always say nasty things to them, just nasty," end of quote. Smith, who was white, described the neighborhood as a family-friendly. The sheriff said that since January 2021, deputies responded at least to a half-dozen calls in connection with what police described as feuding between Owens and the woman who shot her. Quote, "There was a lot of aggressiveness from both of them, back and forth," end of quote. The sheriff said that the shooter told investigators, quote, "Whether it be banging on the doors, banging on the walls, and a threat being made, and then at the moment is when Miss Owens was shot through the door," end of quote. I'm absolutely heartbroken. Angel Farrow, executive director of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, told the Associated Press she described the fatal shooting as, quote, "senseless." Quote, "We've seen this again and again across the country," end of quote. She said, adding that, quote, "It really becomes a lax gun laws and a culture of shoot first." Farrell said, "Stand your ground cases," which he first refers to as the, quote, "shoot first laws," are deemed justifiable or justified 5 times more frequently when a white shooter kills a black victim. In 2017, Florida lawmakers updated the state's self-defense to shift to the burden of proof from a person claiming self-defense to prosecutors. That means authorities have to rule out self-defense before bringing charges. Before the charge in the law, prosecutors could charge someone with a shooting, and then the defense attorney would have to present a affirmative defense for why their clients shouldn't be convicted. In fact, stand your ground and castle doctrine cases, which always allow residents to defend themselves either by law or court precedent when threatened, have sparked outrage amid a spat of shootings across the country. In April, an 84-year-old Andrew Lester, a white man, shot and injured a 16-year-old Ralph Yao, a black teenager, who rang his doorbell in Kansas City after mistakenly showing up at the wrong house to pick up his younger siblings. Lester faces charges of first-degree assault and armed criminal action at trial. He may argue that he thought that someone was trying to break into his house, as he told the police. Missouri and Florida are among the 30 states that have stand your ground laws. The most well-known example of the stand your ground argument came up in the trial of George Zimmerman, who fatally shot Trayvon Martin. Zimmerman, who had a white father and a Hispanic mother, told police that Martin attacked him, forcing him to use his gun in self-defense. He was allowed to go free, but was arrested 6 weeks later after Martin's parents questioned his version of the events, and then Governor Rick Scott appointed a special prosecutor. Before trial, Zimmerman's attorneys chose not to pursue a stand your ground claim, which could have resulted in a dismissal of a murder charges as well as immunity from prosecution. But during the trial, the law was essentially used as part of his self-defense arguments. The jurors